What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Other Guys on the Badlands Podcast Network. I'm Jake Chatsky, joined as always by Paul Kilgallen, and for the first time in a while, we are joined together after a win. Paul, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. Feels like I said on the post game, feels like it's been several hundred years since a win, but it's all good. Had a few days to settle in. Now it's always nice to have a Sunday where the Jets are not playing. It's a little different than when they play on a Sunday night or a Monday night because like when it's Sunday or Monday night, you're just anxious the whole time on NFL Sunday. When it's Thursday or a bye, you're just like, I'm good. Like I can just enjoy football for once. So and there's nothing else going on in the world this week at all. So we're all good. We can just talk about the Jets and have some fun and all relax, right?
Yeah, no, just your casual, Monday, nothing big coming up. I think the biggest thing people want to talk about is tomorrow, the NFL trade deadline. But we can get to that later in the podcast. Uh, the Jets, the Jets won a game. So last week and the week before, honestly, were pretty bleak podcasts. We were very appreciative of the listeners who stuck around. But today we will be nice to the Jets. However, I will start off with a challenging question. And this, I think, we'll get into the game in a second. I agree with you. Having a Sunday off from having to watch stressful football was so nice. I shout out my mom. Got to see my mom run the New York City Marathon this weekend, which was awesome. But after the game and after all the stuff that happened on Sunday with play, there's been a lot of screenshots going around of the AFC standings. And there is certainly potential for the New York Jets to go on a little bit of a run and sneak into the playoffs as a 7 seed. So I'll first phrase the question to you. Do you think they will make the playoffs?
Ooh, do I think they will? No. No, I think they're going to fall just short. I don't think it's going to be the runaway train that everyone was worried about the last 4 weeks. And I don't think it's going to be the, redemption story that everybody's hoping for either. I think it's going to be, like we've said a few times the last few weeks on these podcasts, is like whatever is going to inflict the maximum amount of pain on the fans, like that's generally the outcome that we get, right? And so I think what that looks like is probably a bunch of wins in a row and maybe some unlikely wins sprinkled in there. There's not a ton of truly challenging games left. I mean, Buffalo, obviously. Arizona is not the cupcake game that everybody seems to be implying that it is. They're a division leader at this point. Like, they looked pretty bad the first part of the season, but I mean, look, they're leading their division. It's a road game on the West Coast. It's not an easy game. So I think you probably pepper in some convincing wins, some unlikely wins. You mix that in with some losses that are just absolutely crushing and heartbreaking, whether it's to Flacco and the Colts or, to Tua and the Dolphins, or maybe like, Mike,
Oh no, Tim
geez,
Boyle.
Tim Boyle, like the dude they got off the street from the Ravens from a couple years ago, Huntley, like whoever it is. I think he's on IR now, but like if Tua's hurt again, it's whoever's playing backup for the Dolphins, right? So like you mix in some unlikely losses as well, and I think the end result is we probably come into week 18 with a chance where we need some help and we're not controlling our own destiny anymore. Like at this point in the season right now, there's still enough games left that technically you control your own destiny. Like if you just run the table, chances are you're probably going to make it in and you don't need help. But we're probably going to get to a point in the season later where we need some help and we need to come up with some big wins, and we probably are going to fall just short, and that's going to leave us in that mid zone again of like, all right, let's run it back one more time because it's not convincing enough to tear it down, and it's not necessarily convincing enough to add a couple pieces and let's go. So it's just like we're going to be in that mid zone of tear it down again. So if you're asking for a prediction, I think the answer is no. If you're asking what I'm hoping for, yeah, I'm hoping they do. I was pretty hard on the tank thing last week, and it for anybody that knows me and has known me a long time, like I've never ever rooted for that. So that was a pretty dark place for me to be in last week, and I think like just the 4 weeks leading up to it had just mounted to a point where I was so sick of what I was seeing. But then they come out on Thursday night and they give you this glimmer of hope against what's supposedly a good team in Houston, and like yeah, at the end of the day, if it's possible to be in the playoffs and see playoff football, like that's what I want to see. That's why I'm a fan. That's why I'm here. So while it's alive, yes, that's what I want.
Look, did you hurt yourself sprinting backwards that far? Or
I reserve my right to change my opinion at all times.
listen, no, I mean I'm with you, and I was right there with you last week too, and I think the Jets played obviously like not a Texans team that was not at full strength. They ended up winning a game that I think they were obviously favored in. A lot of people thought that was a fishy line because why the fuck would the Jets be favored? I think a lot of Jets fans had were expecting the Jets to win purely from a we've finally reached the point of no return on this season, so of course they'll win a game now standpoint. And I think it wasn't unreasonable to be like rooting for losses or rooting for the tank going into the game. Obviously, I think a couple things also broke our way this weekend. Denver lost, Indy lost. Obviously, we didn't get the Bengals one, or it wasn't a perfect like this is what you're rooting for Jets playoff hopes to be alive. But the picture has changed, so I don't fault you for changing your opinion. And like we're fans, like we want the team to win. If there's a shot at playoffs, we're going to be rooting for that until it's eliminated. That being said, in terms of my opinion, I think either we just straight up lose to Arizona because I think they're like a lot of people, like you said, are discounting it. Or if it's a maximum pain thing, I do think we go on a run. We beat Arizona, we beat Seattle, we end up losing to the Rams like right before Christmas, and I think that's what ends up fucking us. I could totally see that being a stretch. I don't like logically. I am not expecting this team to make the playoffs, but I will be rooting for a 7 seed with my whole heart, with one major caveat. If the Jets making the playoffs allows anyone to keep their jobs by them limping in as a 7 seed and breaking up, like I would love for the playoff drought to be over just so I don't have to see another stat about how the Jets haven't made the playoffs more than any other franchise in the history of sports. But like we need to rebuild this organization, and no one should carry over their job for getting this team to limp into the playoffs as a 7 seed. That's my stance on the issue.
Agree on that, and there's definitely something poetic about it being the Rams that is the game that takes us out. It's like the opposite of what happened in 2017 or whatever, where they beat the Rams down the stretch. So it would be the opposite of that. So there is something poetic about that. The other thing too, in terms of like for me waffling back and forth on the tank or go for the playoffs type thing, it's like at the end of the day, like look, Jake, I don't think anybody thinks that me and you are experts when they listen to this thing. Like we are just a-hole fans, like the people that are listening to it. Like we're just like you. We just happen to have the opportunity to say it into a microphone. And like this team's really hard to get a read on because even in all the wins and all the losses, they kind of played to pretty much the same level. Like I feel like we have not seen them play a good complete game at any point this season, with the exception of maybe the first Patriots game. And so like you leave every game feeling like there was a lot of meat left on the bone. And what that does to me, at least when I watch as a fan, is it makes it really hard for me to put my finger on like what exactly is this team. Like, what are they? Are they a team that has not yet reached their full potential and they are going to hit their stride at some point? Or is this just who they are and that's not going to happen? And I've had a really hard time getting my arms around like who are the real Jets? What's really going to happen at the end of the season? And that's why I think I've been so volatile week to week about who they are and what the future prospects look like, where I was so bullish at the beginning of the year that like this is going to be a top 5 offense, everything's going to work great. And I've worked my way all the way back to tear it all down, get rid of everybody. I don't want to see anybody come back to like, well, maybe we could squeak it in, right? And just get hot at the right time. So like, I just haven't been able to put my finger on what exactly this Jets team is. And it really is, I think, just going to keep going week to week until we see them play a full, complete game at what their identity is and what they should look like.
All right, so let's get into Thursday night's game. We don't have to dive too deep into it. You obviously already did the post game, and it's been 4 days now. But I do think we need to have on this podcast a moment of appreciation for one Garrett Wilson. We talked about it last week when we were saying to sell everyone, and I said that I want him here. I want him to be a cornerstone. He's the type of player you're hoping to get when you're retooling anyway. And then he went out and proved me absolutely right. making one of the greatest football plays ever, an insane catch. And I want to, this is somewhat of a test. I want to see, your true thoughts, but also just how biased or unbiased you are. The discussion online was, is this better than the Odell catch? So what are your thoughts?
I do think it's better than the Odell catch. Yeah, I mean, the thing that everybody's been saying is that this was a win and that wasn't. Um, I think that for me, like the catches at the hand level, I think were pretty much equal, right? Like both of them were insane in terms of like being able to pull the ball out of the sky and get it down to your chest, right? What I think makes the difference for me is Odell, his momentum was keeping him in bounds, and he kind of like he didn't have to do anything in his lower half to make sure he stayed in bounds. He was about, I want to say he was like a yard off of the sideline falling into the end zone, right? Like Garrett had to get his knee, or in this case, his shin down. And it required that like ballerina foot control in addition to pulling the ball out of the sky and dealing with the defender. So, I mean, look, at the end of the day, these are like really close. And even if the Odell catch was better, I'm probably going to get on here and say the Garrett Wilson catch is better because I'm a Jets fan and fuck Odell Beckham and I think he's a loser. But I do think that like the lower half element of it and needing to stay in bounds makes it just like a little bit ticked ahead of the Odell catch. What do you think?
Listen, so I was fully ready to get on here and just be like, I think the Odell catch is better and that we're all being homers. I will say, like, I agree with you that